Yuck, 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 yuck. Pacers lose to the Knicks. Their chance at the rematch after the playoffs, and the Pacers shoot themselves out of it, literally. A lot went wrong on the defensive end. The starters never clicked at all. We have so much to discuss. Plus, James Wiseman's going to be out for a while. We'll get to it all today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy weekend, whatever day you're listening, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today, we have a lot to discuss from Pacers Knicks because the Pacers looked really rough, really rough. They shot horribly, like historically horribly, like maybe the worst they've shot since I've been covering the team. And Tyrese Haliburton did not score a single point. Their starting lineup looked bad again, and they are now 1-1. They lost the game by quite a bit, despite a pretty good start. And unfortunately, we'll spend the last 10 to 15 minutes talking about James Wiseman and his torn Achilles, the worst news, and what that means for the rest of the season. Such a bummer. This is not going to be a happy, smiley Locked On Pacers episode, but one that must be done. I think I'm going to do these on weekends after weekend games instead of just waiting till the Monday. Let me know what you guys think of that schedule. And I'm obviously not going to double up the home opener with this. So we have to talk Pacers Knicks and the many, many terrible things that happened to the Pacers in this game, because if you can believe it, the Pacers shot 38 for 53 on 2-point shots in this game. That is 71.7%. That is excellent inside the arc finishing. They were only 3% worse than the Knicks from the field in this game. And they got smoked. The Pacers got absolutely smoked because they were horrible from 3-point range. They had lots go wrong on offense. This is not the only reason they lost this game. It's not even close. But the Pacers could not hit the ocean if they fell out of a boat in this game. 3 for 30 on threes. If you're listening to this podcast and you do not play for the Indiana Pacers, you made as many threes as the starting five did in this game. They all were 0 for. A combined 0 for 17 for the starting five from three. 7 misses from Haliburton, 2 from Nembhard, 3 from Turner, 4 for Siakam, 1 for Nesmith. Haliburton had one that he definitely was trying to get going. You got to shoot to get out of a slump. Unfortunately, it can be ugly along the way. Buddy Hield learned that the hard way last year too. And Haliburton now 1 for 16 from deep this season. But in general, I only said it to say, I actually thought most looks were pretty good. I'm going to tweet one of those screenshots of just the when the shot went up things just to really push this point home. Ben Mathurin was 2 for 5 from deep. Excellent. Jarris Walker made 1. Okay. That was it. No one else on the Pacers made a single 3-point shot this entire game. That you will never win. They played the Knicks, who have projected to be pretty good and are pretty good and looked very good after the first quarter of this game. So they would have lost to the Knicks, obviously. They probably lost to anybody, shooting 3 for 30. They shot 29% against Detroit and were able to win. 10% would have lost that game by a lot, right? That is the third worst percentage in my time covering the Pacers. I said 1st July. That's wrong. They had 2 games shooting below 10% in 2018, in January of 2018. The last time the Pacers shot this bad from 3, they played the Lakers on January 19th, 2018. Oladipo made 1 3. Bojan Bogdanovic made 1. That was it. They were 2 for 25. That was the last time the Pacers were worse than this from 3. Every game since, they've been better. That's how historically bad this was. 6 years. 6 years. Unbelievable. They could not make anything in this game. And so much of their struggles kind of bounce out from that. We'll get to individuals and lots of other stuff. But they lost this game, and they couldn't score. Another number that I think is important to highlight, 98 points was the Pacers' final number. They lost to 123-98. 98 is the lowest they scored all of last season, even included. They scored 99 was their low point last year. I was looking up how many times they were under 100, and the answer was 1. They had 99. So since they acquired Obi Toppin and since they acquired Siakam and, have the team looking the way it does right now, that was their worst scoring game. And it was largely because they shot poorly from 3. And it was okay looks, but They didn't go in. Okay to good looks, but they did not go in. They were excellent inside the arc. They also missed 7 free throws. They also had 15 turnovers and were way ahead in the turnover battle until late. It was really like 15-8 until the Knicks garbage time guys had a bunch of turnovers. So they just kind of handed the game away in that way. Long rebounds, Knicks scooped them up. Turnovers, not good. They missed more free throws than the Knicks, despite the Knicks taking 9 more free throws. That won't do it because the Pacers only took 1 fewer shot from the field. They were close-ish in field goal percentage, but the Knicks made 9 more threes and 10 more free throws. You just lose. You just lose on math and efficiency, and that does not even account for the Knicks winning the turnover and offensive rebound battle. So even though the Pacers shot 72% inside the arc for a full game, they got smoked. And I think Rick Carlisle nailed it post-game. He said, I think our offensive struggles, he said transgressions, bled into the defense. Totally right. Partially because it lets the Knicks get in transition, but partially just because, you drop your shoulders, you get, you just take your head out of the game. You're thinking about why you're missing. And it just was horrible. An absolute thumping. The crazy part about it is it was 35-34 Pacers after about 16 minutes. Not even after 16 minutes. They were winning. They played a really good quarter. It looked like it was going to be a fun back and forth battle. And from that point on, the final 32 minutes was so unbelievably lopsided in favor of the Knicks. They won that stretch by 24 points. Excuse me, that's not right. They won that by more than that. They won that stretch by 26 points on their way to getting it done. And outside of Ben Mathurin, who was 20 points on 8 for 13, Siakam, I thought, had a pretty good night, but it will get overlooked. And Turner was efficient. I thought the post players were good. I'm saying too much now. Outside of Mathurin's 20, no one really popped or did enough on offense in this game. Some stuff went well. We'll touch on those in a sec later. But really, really rough offensive game for the Pacers. Just an awful performance. It's their only trip to the Garden all season, and they just fell flat on their face and got completely punked by the Knicks. Was not close at halftime, was not close in the second half at all. Garbage time came quick. They got Enrique Freeman in there with 9.5 minutes left. Johnny Furphy made his NBA debut because of how brutal this one got. The bench had some good moments too, and that makes it even more jarring how bad the starters were. And the follow-up part of this, the biggest story to me is how bad they shot, because you can't win any games if you shoot that bad as a team. The subplot heading to whatever you want to call it was Tyrese Haliburton. 0 points for Tyrese Haliburton. The third time of his whole career, once with the Kings, once last year in New Orleans, and then this game. 0 for 7 from deep, 0 for 8 from the field. He's now 1 for 16 from 3 this season. First of all, unacceptably bad game from your star player. Can't happen. He 10 million% has to be better. Much of this falls on him, and he knows it. He talked about it after the game in his post-game interview. You can watch it in the Indy Star. Excuse me, I can't talk. Now, I think a lot of people were reacting way too strongly, and I think people remember post-injury Tyrese Haliburton very wrong last season, right? I'm going to tell you a bunch of facts that are all true, and you can choose to believe them or not, because even when I was looking them up, I was like, really? That's how this ended up? Okay, Tyrese Haliburton came back from his injury last year on January 30th. Over his next 10 games, he shot 40% from 3. That's true. I did not believe it. Then he had an awful stretch, February 25th through March 20th. They played 13 games. He took 7 threes a game and made 19.5%. He was horrible. His 0-point game was in there, which he followed up with an 0 for 6 game from deep, which you followed up with a 3 for 10, 2 for 7. You were there. You saw it. That 13-game stretch is seared too much into everyone's brains, because he was 40% from deep the stretch before that, and the rest of the season after that, he was 39%. And in the playoffs, he was 38%. And he was good in the postseason. He had 2 rough games and was largely really good in the playoffs. He averaged 19 and 8 on 49, 38, 85 splits in the playoffs. So what people were saying wrong today was, this is the guy he's been since his injury. No, he obviously has been not as good as he was pre-injury. I will not make that argument. He has never been close to this bad. This was unacceptably terrible. He has to be better than this, and he knows it. He'll say it, and he'll come out and be better in the next game, but they will never win if he shoots this poorly and plays like this. And he needs to get to the rim more, right? What saved him in Detroit, like I mentioned, was he got inside the arc. I think he was 5 for 9 on 2s in the game, right? And he found a way to score. He hit, obviously, a 3 when it mattered. He's got to make more than this, though. Really rough offensive night for him. And certainly looking like the mid-March mid to early March Haliburton from last year. That is what is true to say. I don't know where this perception that he was just truly terrible post-injury came from. But what I have always said for those who listen to this podcast is what really changed for him was his shooting from deep, which I just ran through those numbers, because post-injury, he still was pretty close in assists, a little down because his minutes were down. And his 2-point percentage is actually better than pre-injury, post-injury last year. But the outside shooting, especially that stretch I just described, really dipped. So in this game, the parts that he was good at, great passing and finishing inside the arc, none of those happened either. So awful game from him. And that bled into the whole team. And just awful from a Pacers team that could have followed up, a huge thing and talked about this maybe being a rivalry and playing a team that they beat in a huge series last year. Instead, we got Jalen Brunson saying, get him out of here to Aaron Nesmith in the second quarter, and it never got close again, and Cat got rolling, and Brunson had 26, and the Pacers looked terrible on national TV. They looked terrible. They had some good stuff happen that I want to talk about, and then we have to, unfortunately, talk about James Wiseman and his Achilles injury before. Actually, no, let's just run into that. Some good stuff happened in this game. Okay, 1, Ben Mathurin, good again. 20 points on 13 shots, got to the foul line 4 times. Especially in the first half, he was great. He got up some threes where he caught it, and boom, up he went. And the timing of that is huge, right? That's going to matter quite a bit as he kind of works in the quick decisioning. He was certainly doing that early as he was scoring. His and the whole team's defense wasn't as good as it was at times in Detroit, but Mathurin was fantastic early in this game. Had some nice zone possessions as well. I love some high-low stuff that connected in this game. Turner and Siakam had some. Obi Toppin had some. But that was really important. That's kind of a new wrinkle. Not even new, but like a refined wrinkle they've got going on. Mathurin, 7 points in the first quarter, just completely dominated. But the Knicks did a really good job defending the Pacers pick and rolls and forced them to get into other actions. And it didn't really – Pacers never really recovered and figured out how to get out of that. Something else I want to add, by the way, since I just glossed over this in my notes. Obviously, I'm going to call this an offensive loss. The Lakers on opening night, when they played the Timberwolves on national TV, they were 3 for 20 from deep to start that game, and they were still up 15, right? If you defend well enough and make enough twos, and the Pacers did make enough twos, you can still do stuff. So the Pacers did obviously not defend well enough or rebound well enough or take care of the ball. But the shooting was the biggest part of it. I just put that in my notes and wanted to bring it up right now. Other good stuff that happened, Isaiah Jackson was back from injury and was quite good, I thought. 5 for 6 on his way to 10 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists. They need him to be that kind of efficient, and it wasn't all just on dunks and finishes around the basket, although I believe he offensive rebounded his own miss, tipped it right back in. So really, he did every possession that he took a shot, he scored. That was good. They needed him to be good, and he was mobile on defense, efficient on offense. That's what they'll need him to be, especially now with what their new center outlook could look like inside the arc. Another game where they go Jarris Walker first half, Ben Shepherd second half. I'll be curious if that's a trend that lasts the entire season. Obi Toppin and TJ McConnell were efficient, even though you didn't feel either of them as much as you do in some of the games when they're this efficient. And I thought Siakam was pretty dang good in the first half. He's been, I think, the Pacers' best player over the course of all 8 quarters they've played this season, him or Mathurin. But I liked what I saw from Siakam for stretches of this game. Turner had a nasty block and has good stats. In this game, you didn't feel him as much as you did in Detroit. So some good stuff did pop up. They were very good for the first quarter, right? It looked like, they could win this, right? They're keeping up. They're doing enough to stay ahead of this Knicks team. They have a system that's working, and then it all fell apart and never even got close to back. James Johnson scored for the 16th season of his career. That's also cool and good. So that is Pacers Knicks. It was ugly. They need to flush this as soon as possible. If they need to shoot well in their next game, and they really need to have their offense look zippy because the pace hasn't been there and the passing hasn't been there in the way that it was last year that made their offense so special. And they scored enough in Detroit to make everybody go, yeah, they could score enough. And if they had made even a normal amount of threes, like if they go 10 for 30 in this game from 3, let's be clear about the game that the Pacers just played. 10 for 30 is 33%. That's not a good shooting game, right? If the Pacers went 10 for 30 from 3, they lose this game by 4, right? They were awful from deep, awful. That is the whole game. And if they shoot better against Philly or even just remotely better, going forward, they'll look much better. But it hasn't happened yet. I think they need to on Sunday in the home opener. We'll see. I'll be there. We'll talk about it right after that game as well. Now, unfortunately, we should talk about James Wiseman. Torn Achilles. What does this mean for the center position? What can they do about it? What historic Pacers player did this remind me of, and why? Well, boy, will I tell you. Coming right up. Before we do any of that, though, we got to talk about the lovely folks over at FanDuel. NFL fans, you can keep the season rolling with a big return over on FanDuel. They are America's #1 sportsbook. We all have it happen. When it happens to you, you get that hunch. It's in the middle of a game, and there it is. That hunch comes in. Well, you can check out the latest stats of whatever you were either watching or want to check in on and see live up-to-game action play-by-play and so much more details on the same page where you place your bet, so you can know who's doing well and the important timing of the game to know when it's time to act on those hunches. Plus, when you place your first $5 bet with FanDuel, you'll get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets when you place your first $5 bet, and that is on FanDuel.com. Back here on Locked On Pacers, thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Your second listen, either Locked On Knicks, if they put an episode up after this game. If not, they will on Monday. Or Locked On NBA, because they cover every game every day. And officially, finally, I will be on Locked On NBA once a week now going forward. Every Wednesday, Tuesday night games, Wes Goldberg and I will be covering the biggest things from around the association. Should be really fun. Let's keep rocking here. Unfortunately, though, we have to keep rocking with the terrible news that James Wiseman has torn his Achilles. First of all, before we actually analyze what this means for the Pacers and for James Wiseman, this sucks. This is a huge bummer. Great guy, fun to talk to, cool story, huge development piece on a team that's developed very well recently. His teammates really like him. 5 minutes into his first stint with the team, and it's over. It might not be over. I'm sorry, but it might take a long time before we see James Wiseman again. Just horrible. Human level, you feel horrible for a guy who missed a full season of his career with a meniscus injury already to have this happen. Wishing the best for him mentally and physically as he goes through this. Already had the surgery while in New York. Very convenient for the Pacers that they were headed to New York already where the surgeons could be. So we learned it on Thursday, right after I recorded that Knicks preview, unfortunately, that it was a torn left Achilles tendon for James Wiseman. Look, listen. First of all, Carlisle said before the Knicks game that they don't know if it's season end. They haven't ruled him out for the season yet. Now, here's what I would say to that. Jeff Stotts runs In Street Clothes. It's an injury database for the NBA. This is an article from 2018. So keep that in mind. This is 6 years old. Medicine and treatments have gotten better. In his database back then, in 2018, the average time missed for Achilles tears was 10 months. 10 months. That would be next August. The shortest recovery was like Wes Matthews at 231 days. That is mid-June, right? So, yeah, maybe these numbers are smaller and faster now by some amount, but is it that much faster that they could expect James Wiseman to return this season? I would, just guessing, let me be clear, I'm just guessing, I would doubt it, unless it's not all the way torn or we don't know the severity, right? That we don't, there are factors we don't know, but just going through that exercise made me go, oh man, this might be season ending for him. So that is just horrible, just terrible. So what happens now? Because this does unfortunately change things for the Pacers. They wanted a third center. They've had a third center forever. They've had 5 centers at times with this front office. They need a third center, and Obi Toppin is 6'9", and he is now their third tallest player healthy on the roster. So they probably need to add someone. Enrique Freeman has played awesome. Worth talking about should he have an actual roster spot. He's 6'7". He can't be a permanent all the time playing the 5. He can definitely at sometimes play the 5. He did in college, but I don't know if he's ready for that, especially as a rookie. So do they need to add someone? Should they be willing to add someone? Here's the for lack of a better term, the problem, air quotes. So Wiseman's contract is 2 years, so it does not have Exhibit 9 language, which is kind of an injury language thing. And basically every contract in the NBA, has compensation protection for basketball-related injuries. Clearly, playing in a game for a team is a basketball-related injury. And so Wiseman's contract will almost certainly become fully guaranteed now, which, to be clear, is totally fair, right? That is totally fair to him. He should have that be the case. For the Pacers, that means they can't get any relief by waiving him. And so their $2.5 million from the tax is where their position would be if they added a player to their 15th roster spot instead of more than that. There are things they could do about it, and we'll talk about those in a second. But that means they're probably limited to a minimum. So keep that in mind. If you think the Pacers need to sign a center, it has to be somebody who would be taking a minimum salary and likely a non-guaranteed minimum salary or like a lightly guaranteed minimum salary. So here's some other stuff to note. One is they can, if they believe Wiseman will be out through June 15th of next year, calendar year, they could apply for a disabled player exception, and then a play panel would review if they also think he'll be out that long. And if they agree, the Pacers would get a disabled player exception. That said, it would be very small, half of Wiseman's salary, so like $1.1 million. There are uses for exceptions that small, but those are very odd use cases, and they probably couldn't be done until later in the year when prorated contracts have changed. That's one thing that is noteworthy about the Pacers and adding a player. You might as well get the exception as opposed to not, but it's kind of hard to use it at that size. Thing two that's relevant. Let me remind you of something that the Pacers did not very long ago. Let me take you back in time to the 2021, yes, that's correct. The 2021-22 Pacers season. Because at that time, they were very close to the tax. The season before, the cap did not go up very much because the pandemic was going on. They did not have a lot of ways to add talent at the time. Well, wouldn't you know it, a rotation guard for them right before the season tore his Achilles, Edmund Sumner. Many of you remember that happening in that workout. And they needed the tax wiggle room at the time, so they traded away Edmund Sumner with a second-round pick because no one's just going to take him. They're going to have to entice somebody if he's out for the year. That went to the Brooklyn Nets, and then the Pacers signed Brad Wanamaker to get another guard in the door. Ignore the fact that signing did not work out, and just remember that string of transactions. First of all, Sumner got hurt in September. He did not play that season with his torn Achilles. Again, we don't know the severity of Wiseman's or anything like that, so I'm not. And Carlisle said he could return this year. I will take that at face value and say I don't know anything. I'm not a doctor. But that timeline does exist, and that strategy exists. If Wiseman's out the whole season, perhaps, even if his contract becomes fully guaranteed, the Pacers could just trade him away with a second for cap relief to then sign a better center if they need more wiggle room to do so, because they do have their mid-level exception, their biannual exception, things like that. So that's the cap things that matter, right? There are ways for the Pacers to safely continue to build a team and add a third center if they need one. If they believe that Toppin could do it in smaller units, then they might not add somebody. If they believe that Siakam could do it in smaller units, they maybe won't add somebody. If they believe Enrique Freeman could do it all the time, they may not add somebody. But that seems like all of those seem like risky, non-permanent solutions, and they are now a Turner or Jackson injury away from a very position for their third center. So I wonder how the Pacers will handle this. I hope, for Wiseman's sake, he can return as soon as possible. He was playing very well in that Detroit game before he got hurt. It just sucks for him on every level that he got to a franchise that cared about his development and forgot about his past and said, let's go, let's make you awesome here. And it just didn't. 5 minutes. It's just horrible. Just horrible. So the Pacers now have to figure out how to manage this. And it might be too early to decide, right? Maybe they try a couple things before making a move. It should be noted that contracts don't become guaranteed until non-guaranteed contracts don't become guaranteed until early January. So you can't sign 10 days now, but they could sign someone to a non-guaranteed deal and try them as the third center. And if it's not going well, just waive them as long as it's not January yet. So that is a possible reality. Wanamaker got signed and waived before that happened. And it was a big deal that Kiefer Sykes ended up making the team that year, for example. So be on the lookout for potential Pacers answers and solutions there, because they might need a third center. They might need that size at that spot. They certainly went out and got one this summer. after losing Jalen Smith. And so how they handle this now will be very telling and revealing. For example, guys still out there like Bismack Biyombo, who was on the Thunder last year. Moses Brown, he was on the Blazers last year. He's kind of young too. And JaVale McGee's out there. Does he have anything left? Can he contribute? There's centers are there. They're available if needed. Some of the best ones still left, signed overseas. But perhaps they could be enticed, but the Pacers have to pay buyout fees. So keep that in mind if you're about to go Google free agent NBA centers. But that is a path for them to consider is would anyone be willing to take a minimum? Would anyone be taking a non-guaranteed minimum? How much are they going to play? Could they dump Wiseman? Are they not going to dump Wiseman? How are they going to handle the disabled player exception? If they even want one, if they trade Wiseman, they can't get one at all. There's just a lot of kind of layers for them to peel back and figure out. So maybe not an instant solution, for lack of a better term, or instant action to do something here. But they do have a roster spot after they waived Cole Swider last week. So that helps them with their financial flexibility here in some ways. So this is just a huge bummer. And now the Pacers have to figure out what they're going to do about it. If Wiseman can return this year, maybe that changes their calculus. If he is out for the year, like some of the research stuff I suggest is maybe possible, then they really have to think about exceptions and who they should add, if anybody, and how they're going to do it. And are they going to have to make a trade to get this all squared away? There's just a lot of layers to it. But the most important layer is that James Wiseman, I hope he can heal and get better and be able to continue his career, because torn Achilles is just horrible for a guy who already missed a full season of his career. You hate to hear and see it. I thought it was very nice that Tyrese Haliburton wore Wiseman's jersey as a gesture in shoot around before that Knicks game on Friday, and wishing the best for a speedy recovery for him, and hoping that Carlisle's right and there is a way that he can have a path back to the floor this season. But if it is truly a fully torn Achilles, my guess would be that is not the case. We'll see. I'm not a doctor. I do not know everything, but I can talk to you about the Pacers' past history with this exact-ish situation. I can talk to you about the salary cap exceptions that are possible and what could be happening next. And that is everything from a bummer of a day for the Pacers. They lose their only new player who played in the NBA last year for a while. They lose a game in an embarrassing fashion against a potential rival. And now they have to come home and pick up the pieces. Pacers-Sixers on Sunday. So Monday will be the next podcast here, talking about that game, what went right and wrong for the Pacers against the banged-up Sixers. Could they get a win at home, get back on track after a rough one? The Knicks just did this. They went on the road to Boston, got embarrassed, came home, looked great. Pacers will hope that they are next. We'll cover it all here on the Locked On Pacers podcast. I'm on Twitter at Tony Ariz. This podcast is at Locked On Pacers. Plenty of ways to find me and my work, but that is the easiest way to see it all in one place. Thanks, y'all, for tuning in today. Hope you're having a great weekend. We will see you on Monday.